There was a time when ideas were debated in the open air, beneath the shade of grand oaks and in the dim glow of candlelit studies. A time when thinkers and statesmen, for all their flaws and hypocrisies, at least entertained the notion that progress required scrutiny, adaptation, and the willingness to let new ideas flourish. But today our political discourse is anemic, our intellectual curiosity neutered, and our collective spine so fragile that even the whisper of certain words, communism, socialism, sends half the nation into a blind panic, as if the mere utterance might summon Lenin's ghost from the grave to seize our Walmarts and Ford dealerships in a bloody revolution. And yet, despite the frenzied wailing of the self-appointed defenders of liberty, most Americans do not actually know what these words mean. Communism, as Karl Marx envisioned it in his 3-volume Das Kapital, was not a Soviet bureaucracy with drab clothing and 5-year plans of human suffering. Nor was it the forced collectivization of labor at gunpoint. Marx, that old bearded insomniac, scribbling in the British Museum, sought to analyze the flaws of capitalism, not as a means to torch civilization to the ground, but as a way to understand how labor, capital, and power interact. Das Kapital is a critique, not a manifesto, an autopsy of a system that, left unchecked, devours itself from within. But McCarthyism did not have time for nuance, because nuance is the enemy of hysteria, and hysteria was the preferred meal of the American ruling class in the mid-20th century. It was not communism that McCarthy and his cronies feared. It was labor organizing, racial integration, and the possibility that the working class Americans might realize they had more in common with each other than with the businessmen who kept them in line. And so the word communism became a catch-all boogeyman. A farmer asking for fair grain prices? Communist. A teacher wanting better pay? Communist. A black minister calling for civil rights? Communist. Hell, even Dwight Eisenhower, the man who led the Allied forces against the Nazis, was accused of harboring communist sympathies simply because he believed in infrastructure and education. Now, this ridiculous knee-jerk reaction did not end with McCarthy's disgrace. It was refined, polished, and repackaged for a new era. Today, the term socialism is wielded like a rubber mallet by talking heads who couldn't define it if you gave them an encyclopedia and 3 uninterrupted hours of silence. The most basic government functions, public schools, roads, fire departments, are socialist in nature. Yet no one stands on the Senate floor demanding that highways be privatized or that children pay tuition for kindergarten. Socialism at its core is simply the idea that certain things, healthcare, education, basic human dignity, should not be left to the whims of the free market. It does not mean the abolition of private property. It does not mean gulags and bread lines. It means that in a nation where billionaires build rockets to nowhere while children go hungry, there should be a mechanism to redistribute wealth in a way that prevents suffering. But the United States, ever a victim of its own hubris, refuses to engage with economic theory in any meaningful way. Instead, we are governed by slogans, by sound bites, by the inane belief that our economic system, warped as it is by corporate welfare and generational exploitation, is the eternal and final answer to civilization's problems. Meanwhile, the rest of the world moves on. China, a nominally communist state, operates within a framework of state-managed capitalism. Scandinavian nations, often mislabeled as socialist paradises, function through hybrid systems that embrace both market competition and robust social safety nets. No successful nation adheres to a single unyielding economic doctrine because to do so is to refuse to evolve, to deny reality, and to ensure decline. And our founding fathers, for all their blind spots and sins, were thinkers. They read, they argued, they experimented. They did not carve the Constitution into stone tablets and demand fealty to its every word without context or amendment. They designed a system meant to adapt, to shift with the tides of time. And yet here we stand in the 21st century, locked in a Cold War mindset, convinced that the only path to prosperity is through the financial starvation of our own people. We hoard wealth at the top, scoffing at the notion that a government of, by, and for the people might actually serve those people. And we throw tantrums over the idea that the state might fund a sick child's doctor visit, but we do not blink when it signs $1 trillion check for defense contractors. The way forward has never been rigid ideology. It has never been the stubborn refusal to learn. It has been and always will be in the willingness to embrace the best ideas, regardless of their origins, and shape them into something that works. American is not a synonym for capitalist, nor should it be. A nation that clings to the economic theories of the past without questioning their efficacy is not a nation of free thinkers. It is a museum, a relic, and relics do not shape the future. So we must return to being a people who read, who debate, who engage in ideas without frothing at the mouth like rabid dogs at the sound of a forbidden word. The world is changing, the economy is shifting, and the role of government will have to shift with it. We can either sit at the table of thought and progress, or we can remain a nation of frightened children, peering through our fingers, hoping that the words we refuse to say will never come to pass. But history is not so kind. It does not wait for cowards, and it rewards those who think, who act, and who adapt. And if we cannot muster the courage to think critically, then the world will move on without us. Defiance till death.